Hi and welcome back to Plug and Play EV. I'm Steve and this video is looking at our summer road trip travels to date. So the idea will be to summarize everything, give you all the data we can in one video here, and then hopefully we'll get into some more details and the actual sights and sounds of the road trip in a future long form video. So this one being the shorter one, let's not waste any time, jump in and look at our road trip travels in summer 2022. So, first and foremost, where have we been? We headed west from Boston over to our usual stomping grounds of Cleveland, Ohio, which has become a Midwest base for us, with family out there to jump off to other destinations. Last year we went up to Michigan's Upper Peninsula via Chicago and Wisconsin, and this year we did hit Michigan as well, but the first trip was from Ohio down through Kentucky and over to Tennessee to check out a couple of national parks. So we went to Mammoth Cave down in Kentucky and the north part of the Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. So this was a lot of camping on this trip and tents, that kind of thing, so weather played a role. A few hotel stops, but we really didn't hit any destination charges, so majority of what we did was DC fast charging. And it was very heavily based on Electrify America for that first part down in Kentucky and Tennessee. Not a whole lot of other infrastructure down there for non-Electrify America charging. Some EVgoes, but for the most part we were looking at the regular tried and trusted Electrify America stations along the routes in Kentucky and Tennessee. Some of these we've been to before on our trip down to Fully Charged Live in Texas a couple of years ago in the Bolt EV, so it was interesting to go back to these stations and see what they could deliver to the IONIQ 5. So that was the first half, and the second part, after a week of remote working from Cleveland, was going over through Indiana, seeing the national park in the Indiana Dunes over there, and then up the west coast of Michigan, which we touched on a little bit last year with Traverse City and some of those more northern towns, but we liked the look of it, and my wife and I headed up there whilst the kids were in camp. So we had another few days camping, checking out the towns up the coast of Lake Michigan on the west side of Michigan State there. So in total that covered 9 states and 3,954 miles over all of the trips from Boston to Cleveland, down to Mammoth and the Great Smokies, back to Cleveland, up across to Indiana and Michigan, and then back home via Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and back into Massachusetts and Boston. We have traveled in some more through the rest of this summer, but that's a good chunk of the country, you know, the Northeast and Midwest, to really feel what kind of charging we got, see who was the predominant provider in different states, and get some good numbers under our belt. Obviously a lot of it was on the Electrify America Hyundai IONIQ 5 charging plan, so the costs are skewed very much in our favor that way, but we'll try and put up some of the things that it would have cost if we were charging with a vehicle on a Pass Plus membership plan, to give a better idea of real world costs if you're not on one of these promotional plans. So charging sessions, we hit 21 DC charging sessions overall. Those were on Electrify America for the most part. ChargePoint a lot up in Michigan, Shell Recharge, which has a few stations over in New York State on the Evolve New York network, same for EV Connect, and we also managed to get a level 2 ready charge in Michigan, which is a network that is purporting to expand out fast charging quite a lot up there, especially on the much needed infrastructure in the Upper Peninsula. I don't think it's quite got into gear as far as fast charging goes yet, but the level 2 chargers that we came across were very useful. Level 2 was a part of this trip. Some destination charging certainly in Cleveland at our home away from home, and in Michigan some of the towns around there were very helpful to have destination charge as we explored the area. We certainly noticed it when we didn't have that. DC charging was predominantly getting to places on the interstates and that kind of thing. Didn't see it so much in the remote areas such as the Great Smoky Mountains. Notably, there were some chargers there that could have been useful at visitor centers but were old equipment and were broken. Looks like there may be some new stations going in up there at select areas, but it kind of reminds why companies like Rivian are probably going to have to take it into their own hands to build out this adventure network and really cater to people who want to take these vehicles up into the more remote parts of the country, in the national parks, that kind of thing, because it doesn't seem like the build out has been particularly good in a lot of these places. Level 2 destination charging is fine at these places as well, would make a big difference. We did see our first Rivian chargers up in one of the beaches at Holland, Michigan, so good to see the Rivian Waypoints network starting there. We didn't charge in that particular case, but it's definitely something that'll be useful. These were 11.5 kilowatt chargers, so really making the most of this car's capability and some of the newer models that come out with that higher level of level 2 charging and a bit more power into the car every hour. A couple of hours charge on that, 25 kilowatt hours is going to be a pretty solid charge and get you back a decent chunk of your pack, especially if you're in a car like this. But anywhere that offers destination charging was very valuable, especially as we didn't really look for it in the hotels and the campsites weren't really something we could use it for. And in terms of cost, as I say, we have the IONIQ 5 charging plan for free for 2 years on Electrify America, so that really brought down the costs here. But we, for our part, paid $75.07 in charging, mostly off charge point, and some of the destination charges, also including home charging in that cost, those costs, which works out as a pretty paltry 2 cents per mile. That's about as good as we've done in the Bolt EV. So obviously that's really good. But even with the Pass Plus plan, if we had been paying for these charges, it doesn't amount to an extortionate amount, especially when you consider the cost of gas in certain places right now. But remember, a lot of people do these comparisons and they take the 43 cents per kilowatt hour that is just Electrify America's kind of flat rate off plan. Nobody is going to go on a road trip without getting on that Pass Plus plan because it always equalizes around that 33 kilowatt hour mark. So the $4 that you pay for the Pass membership, which is only a monthly thing you can cancel at any time, is going to pay itself back after about half a battery pack charged. So anyone who's going to be doing multiple charges on Electrify America would need to get on that Pass Plus plan, reduce the rate down to either 31 cents per kilowatt hour in those states that do charge by energy, or down to 12 cents per minute in states that charge by time. And that's always going to be cheaper. It's just the way to go on a road trip. And what about charger reliability? Well, it's definitely a big topic at the moment. I think this year a lot of folks have returned to the roads. Previous years have obviously been in pandemic for the last couple of years, so there are perhaps fewer EVs on the road in those years. And also this year, there's just a lot more EVs coming out. We saw our first Ford F-150 Lightning on the road, a decent number of Rivians out there right now, especially in the kind of Midwest areas, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. Then you've obviously got the IONIQ 5, the EV6, Ford Mustang Mach-E, a decent amount of those out there. So more and more people are hitting the roads in their electric vehicles, maybe that they've purchased in the last 12 to 18 months, and starting to test out the networks, particularly Electrify America, because you have the majority of those on highways where people want to travel. You have a lot of models on free charging plans with them, or a certain amount of complementary energy. And it's the network of choice, of course, for any EV that can charge at a decent high rate, because it's the network that is going to give you at most charging stops a 350 kilowatt station. And there's been, a lot of pushback on whether the network is up to speed. We didn't have a whole lot of problems. Honestly, we found, I think, maybe 2 charging stops where it was inconvenient. We had to either wait or had a charging session error. And the biggest problem really seemed to be congestion, something we pointed out last year after 2021's travel. We're starting to get to a point where all of the stalls are filled up. It's not that unusual to roll up and be the last one pulling into a stall, or in more popular locations have to wait for for a charge. So we did have to wait in Manchester, Connecticut, which is a 6-stall station. All stations operational, but you know, a lot of activity around there. That was one of those kind of core locations that is in central Connecticut. Big hub for people going north, south, and east, west. So there's, you know, there's action there. There's a lot of people trying to use those chargers. Probably a bunch of people local to Hartford as well, and that kind of area. And it gets busy. So, you know, that's in the same way that the Tesla superchargers in certain key locations, like out in California, have started to come under strain and had to add more locations nearby. That needs to happen with the public charging infrastructure, probably even more so, because there are fewer stalls at a lot of these sites. More and more models are coming out. If anything, we're in a supply constrained time at the moment. More people want EVs than can actually get them for various reasons. So at some point that's going to change, and more EVs will be on the road, and what we have right now isn't going to be sufficient to cater to them. Admittedly, some of these locations, most notably in Tennessee, had a station offline, which then impacts onto the congestion further still. That was a strange station actually, because we saw 2 GM Bright Drop vans charging, and they seem to be doing testing. I don't know if that's related to some of the test centers that are nearby. But if it is, this was those 2 vans taking up 2 spaces, a Marquee just about squeezing its nose in to use the 3rd available charger, and then one of the units offline, which we would have used had it not been out of commission. So in that case, you can start to see, well, that's annoying. Certainly you want that last station to be up and running, but that is as much on testing those 2 big vans, which were drawing pretty slow charging power and taking up those spaces, as it is Electrify America for having a station down. And then it's important to remember that those were 2 out of 21 sessions, so 10% you could certainly say that was frustrating, but then 90% of the travel across 4,000 odd miles, very good. Very rarely did we have to plug in more than the first time. It's easy to start up. We came to use the Electrify America app through Android Auto. Pull in, find out which station you're on, select it in car from the app, and then it's ready to plug in as soon as you get out of the car, and charging starts and you're off to the races. In terms of the car's charging, it pretty much lived up to all expectations. The heat started to be a factor as we got down into the southern states, or the states that are further south at least, and we were pulling up to, you know, 220, 230 kilowatts as the car can take. It started to be interesting to see what the car does at those higher states of charge as the battery pack warms up and needs to start conditioning. Got a separate video on that out from earlier this month that you can see, and looking at that kind of Hyundai heat cliff where it just collapses at around 80-81%. Some people have suggested trying out the turning off the climate control to aid the cooling of the pack. Which I think is interesting, but it depends whether you're in the car. Realistically, if it's in the 90 degrees kind of plus territory, you aren't going to want to sit in your car and leave the air conditioning off. So you'd have to at that point go to a different location and just let it do its thing. That may be worth doing, but again, that's future tests really. Just knowing that it was able to sustain those high charge speeds when we were able to get on the right level of hardware, and most of our charge sessions were at most 25 minutes, quite often 15 to 20 minutes, getting up to 80-85%, and then hitting the road again to avoid that heat cliff, and just getting to the next charger or the destination and then doing some charging locally. Then in terms of efficiency and the kind of range we saw on the car, actually pretty good. Overall was 3 miles per kilowatt hour, which you'll know if you've watched any of our previous videos on the car is better than a lot of the highway range we were getting back on road trips in April and May. But again, you know, some of that was not highway. There's a lot of highway to get to these between states kind of places, but then we hit the slower roads in Michigan, moving between Indiana and up the west coast of Michigan. On the lake there, we would drive at slower kind of 50-55 miles per hour roads. So you saw us clawing back some of the 2.8, 2.9 miles per kilowatt hour that we'd established over the earlier parts of the road trip on that trip. but not bad at all. That puts you at around 232 miles on a charge, and 3 miles per kilowatt hour is nothing to sniff at as you cover 4,000 miles or so. As I say, that's about 232 miles on a charge. So the biggest takeaways overall, I think, from this trip, which is, you know, other than our spring trip, the biggest by far we've done in the IONIQ 5 to date, the fast charging held up consistently. Heat wasn't a problem because by the time it got to those really hot temperatures, we were already at 75–80%, and it didn't matter that it was going to charge slowly. We unplugged and moved on to the next place. Charging reliability, very solid. A vast majority of our stops were pull into the first stall we selected, plug in via the app, and off to the races. Car was invariably done before we were, whether it was getting supplies in a grocery store that was next to us or trying to stop for a meal. Biggest takeaway is it's really it's a fast food car. You know, you either stop, grab fast food and eat it in the car, or if you're planning a sit-down meal, you're probably going to be going out to move your car before the meal has arrived. The other advantage that we found of the IONIQ 5 specifically was the customizable cabin. So being able to move all these pieces in the car, the back seats and the 60/40 split move forward and backwards. The console in the middle here moves forward and backwards, and it's just the more spacious of the options that we've looked at when we were upgrading from the Bolt EV, and it proved to be very useful. You know, being able to move those seats forward. Obviously you'd prefer to have the rear passengers have as much space as possible, but when you've got stuff to cram in, when there's a lot of camping gear to move between sites, you can move those seats forward, get more of your gear in the back there, increase your rear luggage space, that kind of thing. And then when you're unloaded and the tent's set up and all your stuff is out in the campsite, then you can move the seats back and your local travel is a bit more spacious for the rear passengers. So there we go, a quick wrap of 4,000 miles. Always hard to do, and I've probably missed a bunch of things. There will be a longer version of this road trip and all the sights and sounds. Some people have asked for very long, kind of almost epic kind of road trip videos that I wouldn't necessarily normally tend to, but I'll make an effort to get the sights in, capture the flavor of the places we visited. So watch for those road trip videos coming up. Let us know down in the comments. Always interested to hear how people's road trips are going, what the public charging network is doing for them, and how it's holding up, what you're seeing at the local charging stations. And watch out for the future videos because there's a lot of road trip stuff ahead. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Cheers.